Welcome to Mystery Science Theater Presents Graphing. Today we're going to learn how to analyze data through a graph. So you've collected some data, and now you're ready to create a graph. The first step in creating a graph is to draw axes. You learned about axes in math when you had an x-axis and a y-axis. These are just horizontal and vertical lines that form the basis of our graph. So we'll go ahead and draw them like this. The next step is to label the axes. We need to know which variable is going to go on which axis. To do that, we need to know about independent and dependent variables. In an experiment that you perform, the independent variable is the variable that you controlled, the one that you changed. If you're not sure, or you're given data, in this case age and weight, we'll always assume that the first column of data represents the independent variable and the second column represents the dependent variable. So the independent variable, unless there's a specific reason to do otherwise, will always go on the horizontal axis, and the dependent variable goes on the vertical axis. So as we label these axes with our independent variable, age in months on the horizontal and weight in pounds on the vertical. Notice the way it's labeled, the variable, and then in parentheses you've got the unit. The next step in creating a graph is to scale the axes. Scaling the axes means to put a number line on the axis so that you can form the basis of where you're going to be plotting those points. So in this case, the age goes from 0 to 5, and the weight goes up to 0 to about 8.4, or is about 0 to 9. So we scale them like this. Notice that on the horizontal axis, every other grid line represents 1, whereas on the vertical axis, every grid line represents 1. It doesn't matter if the horizontal and the vertical ones are different, but it does matter that the horizontal is consistent and that the vertical is consistent. In other words, each grid line on the horizontal represents the same spacing, and each grid line on the vertical represents the same spacing. The next step in the graphing process is to plot the points. And as we plot the points, we look at the age, and we go over to the age of 1, and we go up to the weight of 6.8, and we put a point there. And we repeat this process for the rest of the points. So as we plot the points, it's going to look something like this. Once we've plotted the points, the final step in graphing is to draw the best fit. And so as we draw the best fit, in this case it looks like they line up pretty well, so we can draw a line that represents the best fit. Now your best fit, sometimes it'll be a line, sometimes it might be a curve, but your best fit should have a few points above and below the line and follow the basic trend of the data. And now you have created a graph and followed all 5 of the steps, drawing the axes, labeling the axes, scaling the axes, plotting the points, and drawing the best fit.